Drink your coffee, read your sports, listen to the Dream Report.
Good morning and welcome to the Dream Report, the week in appraising. It is Monday morning, August 17, 2026. I am Marcus.
And I am Dana. This week, the story is not about the newest iron on the lot. It is about the middle of the fleet and why that is exactly where an appraiser needs to be paying attention right now.
Let's set it up. Over the last couple of weeks, 4 separate episodes of the Moving Iron podcast, hosted by Casey Seymour and Greg Peterson, have converged on the same read of the used ag equipment market. The titles alone tell the story. Used equipment prices surge as market momentum builds. Why used equipment prices won't drop even when times are tight. The market is speaking through auction prices and understanding the new normal.
4 episodes on one theme usually means something real is happening. But before we lean on that, we want to flag something for anyone tracking this the way we are. Moving Iron and Machinery Pete have shared a corporate parent since January 2025, when Farm Journal bought both brands. So when those 2 shows agree with each other, that is not 2 independent confirmations. It is one publisher's read, said twice.
Which is why the number that actually moves this from interesting to verified comes from somewhere else. Farm Equipment, a separate publisher with no ownership overlap, reported this week that dealers in its latest dealer sentiment survey say price contribution is up about 1.5% year over year. That is up from roughly 1% the month before. Different publisher, same direction.
So here's the actual finding, and it is more specific than used prices are firm. Casey Seymour and Greg Peterson's read across those 4 episodes is that the scarcity is not showing up at the new end of the age curve, and it's not showing up in the oldest, most worn-out stuff either. It's concentrated in the middle. Call it the 5 to 10-year range. Late-model, low-hour units get attention, but the actual supply crunch is in mid-aged iron that used to trade freely and now does not.
Part of why is behavioral, not just financial. The same hosts have noted that owners are stretching ownership cycles instead of turning equipment over on the schedule they used to. High new equipment costs are pushing more buyers toward that used pool instead of a dealer floor plan, and every owner who holds an extra year or 2 is one fewer mid-age trade-in hitting the market this season.
And that matters to us specifically, not generally, because of where most fair market value and orderly liquidation assignments actually land. You're not typically appraising the newest unit on the lot or the oldest one headed for salvage. You're appraising the fleet truck that's 6 years old, the combine that's 8 seasons in, the tractor with real hours but real life left. That's precisely the band that just got thinner.
Which means if your comp pool for a mid-age asset feels thinner than it did a year ago, that's not necessarily a research failure on your part. It may be the market, and that's a scope of work conversation before it's a valuation conversation. You may need to widen your geographic radius, extend your transaction date window, or lean harder on dealer verification calls, and you should be documenting that decision in the work file rather than quietly padding a thin comp set and hoping it holds up.
In practice, that often means writing down the reasoning, not just the result. An appraiser who pulled comps from 400 miles out instead of the usual 100 can note why. One who stretched a transaction window from 90 days to 6 months can note that too, along with the date the call was made. A reviewer or an opposing expert who sees a widened search radius with no explanation may read it as a red flag. The same widened radius with a documented reason tends to read as an appraiser who caught a real market shift and adjusted the assignment accordingly.
There's a second piece of this that adds texture rather than just confirming the trend. A newer episode from the same Moving Iron hosts, August auction market heats up as pre-harvest demand stays strong, described an auction that pulled in more than 1,500 people on site with 0 online bidding. People showed up in person because they wanted the iron badly enough to bid live rather than watch a screen from home.
And the example that stuck with us from that episode, a 9-year-old batwing mower sold for $19,000, not because it was rare or new, because the blades were unused and the arbor bolts were still factory. Condition drove that number, not the model year on the tag.
Which is the same lesson from a different angle. Buyers are not simply chasing the youngest asset they can find. They're chasing the best-kept asset in a pool that has gotten smaller, and they'll pay a real premium for documented condition even on a machine that's most of a decade old. If you're leaning on age-based depreciation tables without weighting condition heavily enough right now, this is the market telling you that gap is going to show up in your conclusions.
One more thread worth planting, even though it's not fully developed yet. That same moving iron run touched on the road to autonomy and ag equipment, and it's worth flagging as a factor we expect to keep coming up. Autonomy packages and connected data entitlements are starting to show up as something buyers weigh when they're deciding what a machine is worth to them, separate from the iron itself. We're not ready to put a number on that today, but it's a thread we'll keep pulling on in the coming weeks.
Let's close with a market note that connects back to something we covered a couple weeks ago. Fred data released August 9th shows the retail price for regular gasoline, all formulations, up 5.8% from $3.85 to $4.079 a gallon. To be clear, that is gasoline, not diesel, so don't drop that number into a trucking fuel input.
And kind of just tagging on to that, are we starting to see the Rust Belt media surveys match up with the regular retail prices? Is that something that we can expect to see in the near future?
Absolutely. Let's plant that thread and keep pulling on it next week. So we'll talk about it next week. But it connects to our piece on ATRI's cost index, where the finding was that fuel ran essentially flat for all of 2025. And a flat line item inside a blended cost index quietly drags the whole blended number below what its actually moving components are doing. If retail fuel is turning upward now, that same dilution effect starts running in the other direction. Next year's blended read could end up overstating the swing instead of understating it. And that's worth remembering the next time someone hands you a single blended percentage number and calls it the whole story.
So that's the week. The headline is not about the newest equipment on the market. It's about the middle of the fleet holding value harder than expected, buyers paying up for documented condition over raw age, and a reminder that a single blended index number can hide as much as it reveals.
Thank you for listening to The Dream Report, The Week in Appraising. We'll talk to you next Monday.
Have a productive week.